Hey everybody, so today we're going to be making a homemade arrow. I made this one yesterday and I'm super pleased with how it turned out. So we're going to make a second one today and I'm going to walk you guys through my process of doing that. And at the end of the video, we're going to take these arrows and we're going to shoot some balloons with colored powder in them. So let's get started. Okay, so the first thing you should do is get your arrowhead ready. This is important to do first so you know how deep to dig the groove that the arrowhead sits in your shaft. So for the head, I went and bought this little conduit box at Lowe's, and I took the lid off of it and I cut it in half, and I just used this flat bit. I used a permanent marker and I traced the shape of an arrowhead, and then I used a table jigsaw and just cut the shape out. After I did that, I used a file to give it a little bit of an edge, and then I used a round file to fake a kind of a flint knapping look and give it little chunks out of it, and it made it look kind of authentic. So this conduit box cost me about $5.50 at Lowe's, but I figure especially if you make the arrowhead just slightly smaller than I made that one, I think you could probably get 12 arrowheads out of this thing by cutting up the various sides and the lid. So yeah, I figure one of these arrowheads will probably cost you around 50 cents. All right, so next let's move on to the arrow shaft. This is just an oak dowel rod that I picked up at Lowe's for about $1.50. So next what you want to do is you want to start digging out your groove for your arrowhead to sit in. So what I did is I just drew a straight line with a Sharpie, and I took a coping saw and I just started digging out one side and then dig out the other, and then I tried to pop out that middle bit. And after I got a little bit of a groove going, I found that it was easier to use a file instead of keep trying to use the saw. So just file it out. It's just a little bit of trial and error. You might have to file out the sides more to get the arrowhead to fit in. The first time I tried to make these, I did not make the shaft, or I did not make the notch nearly deep enough. So you see I have it coming up good bit beyond the little notch that I have here in the side of the arrowhead. Okay, and so once my notch was done and dug out, I went ahead and attached the arrowhead. You just slide it into that little groove that you've dug out. So I used a little bit of electrical tape to just hold the string in place and get it started. I did a little bit around the base, and I just started doing a crisscross pattern up and down and around the arrowhead. And then after I'd done that several times, I just went around the top, just straight across the top several times around, then came back down to where the tape was at, and then used a second piece of electrical tape to tape the tail of the string in place. So moving on to the back of the arrow. So I used chicken feathers that somebody had given me. If you don't have access to real feathers, I think you can go to the dollar store or go to a craft store and buy artificial feathers. And I would guess that would probably cost you $1 or $2 for a bag of them. So these things are, probably gonna cost you pennies total. So to get the fletchings, what I did, I took my feathers and I took a box cutter and I just split the feathers down the middle. It's important to use the same side of each feather because it gives the back of the arrow a nice little corkscrew. If you use the same, if you use two halves from the same feather, the feathers are going to be turning opposite directions, and it's going to cause your arrow to not spin or to just wobble all over the place. So it's important to use 3 whole separate feathers and use the same half from each feather. Once I had my feather halves ready, I took my box cutter again and I cut away a bit of the feather at the front and back to expose just the bare stem, and that's where I was going to be attaching the feather to the shaft. So I started with the front and I just used a little bit of tape on each individual feather half to just hold it in place while I did the rest. So I taped that in place at the very, very end. I used some string and worked my way up and down the shaft, and you can get kind of decorative with it if you want. So I bound it with the string and then alternated between string and tape, gave it a nice stripe look, as well as just using string is tedious, but depends on what you want to do. I use a combination. You could use all tape, you could use all string, just depending on how much time you want to put into it. Once I was done with the front portion, I just went to the back and I did the exact same thing. I just took a combination of string and tape and I just bound down the exposed part of the stem on the feather. Once the fletchings were done, I moved to the very back of the arrow to dig the groove for the bowstring to sit in. So I made sure that the 2 grooves, the one at the very back and the one that the arrowhead sat in, I made sure that they were aligned. So when the arrow is sitting on the bowstring, the arrowhead would be sitting straight up and down. Once everything else was done, I just took a pair of long scissors and I cut the tops of the feathers off just to give the edge a nice straight look. So that is pretty much it. With that done, let's go out into the yard and pop a couple of balloons with these things, give them a try. So I have my bow and I have my arrows and I got my balloons and the wind is blowing, so this is gonna be kind of difficult. We'll see what happens. So that worked pretty well. Both of the fletchings survived, both of the arrowheads stuck on there. Let's see if we can get the other two. I'm gonna try my luck at something. Just gonna see what happens. We might just end up, this might just be a wasted shot. Well, got one of them. Another successful shot. Both of these are holding up just fine. Let's go ahead and take out that last balloon just for the fun of it. All right, that was fun. Back to the workshop. That's it for this video. Thanks everybody for watching. If you enjoyed that, please consider clicking subscribe and staying tuned, because this weekend we are doing a build that is meant to launch this arrow. So if that sounds interesting, click subscribe, ring that little bell, and we will see you guys next week. How'd that sound?
That sounded good.
All right, stop it.